Last Thursday, on the 23rd of June 2016, Britain voted to exit European Union, and it was said to be the highest turnout in the entire UK-wide vote since the 1992 general elections. And joining me on the set to talk about more about the Brexit is the head of the European Union delegation to Rwanda, Ambassador Micheal Ryan. A warm welcome to the BQ. And a warm welcome on the set as well.
Thank you very much. Muraho to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here.
I hope you heard that. He said Muraho, so probably you can answer him. And you're with me, Ime Mule Katente. Now, Ambassador, please take us through. What does the Brexit in this particular situation for the European Union mean for the entire partnership or entire bloc?
It's a huge shock. It's what I would call a seismic shock. We've not had anything like this in the past. We're in uncharted territory. The wish of a member state, an important member state, one of the 28, to leave the European Union has never happened before, and it is something which is being greeted with a great deal of dismay and regret, and yet a certain amount of understanding and a wish to move on. And what it means for the European Union is that as we've seen the repercussions on the day after, when the vote was announced last Friday, the financial markets in UK, but elsewhere in Europe and elsewhere in the world, immediately tumbled.
Yep.
The pound lost 30% of its value that morning.
Yep.
Unprecedented. What we're engaged in now is discussion with the United Kingdom. There were meetings in Brussels over the last 2 days to see what the government of David Cameron intended, and for him to hear from the European Union what was the wish of the 27 member states in pushing through with the process of exiting.
European Union was formed immediately after World War II, and the intention was not to have wars like that against each other country, ever to happen. Does this jeopardize the intention of the partnership that was intended then?
I don't think so. I don't think so, but it's very true that underlying principle of the formation of the European Union, iron and steel community at that time, was never again, and that's a phrase which echoes very much here in Rwanda.
Yep.
Those principles of uniting to avoid conflict, uniting to create peace and stability, are at the bedrock of the rationale of the European Union. The departure of one country won't change that, because that partner, who has been with us for 40 years, and by the way, they haven't yet formally requested their exit, but that Britain and United Kingdom shares those values of peace and stability that the rest of the European Union does. Its values are our values, and our values are its values. So we're talking about detail here and there on some of the trade issues, and possibly on migration, but the fundamentals are shared by all. So the principle of the formation of the European Union is largely intact.
In the beginning, you said that this is a shock because it has never happened before. But last summer or last year, we had a similar event of the Brexit. Greece wanted to exit the European Union. Why do you think this is happening the second time, especially to the entity?
Well, the situation of Greece was a referendum over whether or not the Greek population wanted to accept more austerity or the financial package and the conditions related to it proposed to the government of Greece. It's true that there was
an intention
and a prospect, and happily we've got past that. But that was based on Greece's particular circumstances, a country in a certain amount of economic difficulty, to say the least. Whereas for Britain, it was a vote in a referendum under no duress. Do we want to remain within the European Union or not? And a vote which has clearly divided the country. I've heard the expression, there's the Romania and Livania.
Livania, okay.
Two parts of the United Kingdom, sadly. And of course you also have Scotland, which clearly wants to remain and is having its own discussions with the European Union. Northern Ireland has yet to declare itself on what it wants to do, but the majority of its population voted to remain within the European Union. But clearly there is only one country and one government of the United Kingdom, and so it's very complex and very difficult, even though everyone understands the sentiment of Scotland, but we'll have to wait and see how that works out.
Okay, Brexit didn't happen, yeah? Is there a possibility that Brexit will actually happen? Will the Livanians actually take the lead, or it's just a Farge?
Well, they have taken the lead. They voted 52% against 48%. So at the moment, it's a non-binding referendum, but clearly the government of the United Kingdom is very much affected by that. The Prime Minister has resigned. Well, he will resign with effect at the end of September. There's a leadership race for the Labour Party, and so the country is going through a certain amount of political turmoil while it looks to see how it can resettle itself, I presume, before beginning these negotiations on an exit or triggering the process, the so-called Article 50 of exit. And you have on the other side the European Union, which doesn't want to wait this long, which is concerned of the impact of uncertainty on the financial markets and on their economies, and also on elements within their own populations which might fall prey to the temptation of populism, if I can put it that way.
EU foreign ministers have come on to Britain telling them to forcefully go, okay, divorce if you want to divorce. Are they oblivious of Article 50 that gives it at least some time, or even around 2 years before the exit actually happens?
The Article 50 can be triggered at any time, and Britain is yet to trigger it. I think the discussion is over the time period leading up to the famous letter that would be written to the head of the European Union triggering Article 50 or the intention to leave. Then, once that is set in motion, there's a 2-year period of negotiation which will set the terms of the new relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union. But I think what we're talking about right now is, on the one side, many of the European Union member states want that letter to be written and signed and sent as quickly as possible. Others feel that there might be a value in letting a few months pass by to allow what is clearly a very tumultuous and slightly chaotic time and period to see how the dust will settle, and to see might there be new thinking on this. I have no idea, but there are these two.
Wouldn't it be what European Union wants? Because Britain is also such a big entity, or a big state in the Union. Isn't it what the Union actually wants, for them to change their minds and then come back to the partnership?
Well, there are 27 other member states, and with varying views on the pace and content, let's say, of an exit. With my long experience of working in the European Union, I sense that our traditional method of working in a methodical and reasoned, and if necessary, time-consuming way is better than rushing something through in the heat of the moment. And but that's my own experience, and I can't speak for all the 27 member states.
Sure. And after a formal letter has been sent to the EU, is there any way that it can be overturned? Can there be any change within those 2 years if negotiations actually go through? Can there be positive results?
It's tempting to say that even if the letter is in the post and a few months later or a year later, if a different sentiment or popular sentiment, let's say, develops amongst the UK population that the exit might be reversed. These are dangerous temptations to fall victim to, because I think once the letter is there, it's clear that what the 27 will want is set the conditions for your new relationship with us and goodbye, rather than having this dragging on to the possible disadvantage of other countries who clearly don't want the UK disease of exit to catch on elsewhere.
Now, is there a possibility, if there is a successful exit, is there a possibility to rejoin? In case Britain realizes along the way that, hey, we thought we could make it on our own, and realize there's a lot more we need from the European Union, is there a possibility they can rejoin?
I don't think, it's hard to imagine that within a decade or so, but I don't think there's anything that would prevent that. I do think that the terms of re-entry would be far tougher than those of its exit. In other words, it could rejoin, but it would have to go through the long negotiations that countries, recent countries, such as Croatia, for example, the last member to join, went through. And this takes years, and the opt-out clauses and the other benefits that Britain have been unique to the United Kingdom might not be on offer anymore. So it might find that the terms and conditions are quite different. And I think personally what the rest of Europe will want to see is that there is a willingness and a commitment to Europe from the population of the United Kingdom and the government of the United Kingdom if it was rejoining, because there have always been this lingering doubts about where the heart of excuse me, where the British heart truly lay. Was it really that committed? I personally believe Britain has been an excellent partner of the European Union and has lived up to its commitments to the full. And it's a very sad period for any of us who have worked in the European Union. I have for several decades. This is a sad moment, really, truly.
There have been some threats of other countries actually threatening to exit, like Le Pen's slogan of Frexit.
Yes.
Is there? Do you envisage that probably some other countries would want to exit the European Union after what has happened with Britain?
I don't think so. But what there are populist movements within these countries who might seize upon the idea of an anti-EU slogan to drive forward their own agenda, and I think this is what governments will want to counteract as quickly as possible. I think that's an important consideration, but the governments of the 27 member states are as committed to Europe as now more than ever before. What might happen is that there could be a more serious reflection on addressing some of the issues which were raised in the debate in the United Kingdom. Okay. Possibly on how this idea of Brussels, as it's called, works, how the bureaucracy works, how issues related to migration are managed, because this has been a very emotive subject, much misread by many people, by elements of the media as well. This might happen. Who knows? I think whatever is the outcome, the next 6 months, the next 12 months are going to be one of some energy given to what is the future of Europe, even though we try to maintain our calmness and our serenity. But the European Union is well used to crises. We live from one crisis to another in a way, whether it's economic or otherwise, and I'm sure that we will get through this one, because the logic of the European Union to create peace and stability and prosperity and to share that with its partners, like Africa, is very much there and is very much unshakable.
You're talking about Africa, and it's the next thing I wanted to talk about, but those are some of the questions we are going to be able to dissect immediately after the break. We'll now take a very short break, and the BQ will be right back. Please stay here with us. Welcome back. We now want to take a look at some of the questions that you have sent onto our Twitter pages. Don't forget you can go onto our Twitter pages at RTV English, at RB Rwanda, and mine at Imemolekatete, and you can leave a question, a comment, or a suggestion on who we can host next on the BQ. We're still with the Ambassador, Micheal Ryan, head of the EU delegation to Rwanda. And we bring in a question by Isabel Masozera. Over the years, Britain has made great strides in lobbying for trade agreements with some African countries within the EU. Case in point is the SADC agreement. Do you think this is going to be affected?
No, trade agreements are negotiated by the European Commission on behalf of all the 28 member states. Britain, United Kingdom, very much part of that process. We signed the agreement, an economic partnership agreement with the SADC countries 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
We are waiting to sign with the East African community on the 18th of July with bated breath and our fingers crossed because we've yet to get the confirmation of that, and I would urge all the members of the East African community, economy ministers, trade ministers,
yes,
and heads of state to not be deflected from that resolve, because remember this is an agreement that we initialed last year,
yeah,
and we are now going through the formality of its signature. But to answer your question, the European Union, with or without Britain, still continues its negotiations on trade agreements with blocs and countries all around the world, and with the same built on the same set of principles to establish free trade, but with sufficient safeguards to the partner countries to ensure that their industries and their economic activities are not threatened. And that is the situation with Rwanda. Rwanda, part of the East African community, will benefit from that trade agreement whether Britain is in or out.
Okay. And does this also in any way, I would love us to briefly talk about the aid issue, because there are many developing countries that are always expecting from European Union and other developed countries. Is there any way that we are going to expect a downsize in some of the funds that come to Africa in particular?
Not immediately, and I'm not sure about the future. And the reason I say that is the funds which we provide to our partners in Africa are drawn from the European Development Fund, which
Britain has been contributing to.
Yes, okay. Britain is a major contributor. 15% of that fund is comes from the United Kingdom. So their withdrawal might mean that they will want to take the money out of the fund as well, or the amount that's remaining in this current budgetary cycle. This we don't know, and this we have to wait and see. I suspect that there will be no overall damage to the level of development coming from EU 27 plus UK should they leave.
Okay.
Because UK is one of the most committed donor countries when it comes to development cooperation. It's one of the better countries in meeting its 0.7% GNP target for development assistance. The money that it would take out, I would assume that it would channel into development assistance.
Okay.
It just wouldn't have the European Development Fund tag on it. It would be very difficult, but it's possible, but difficult to envisage a situation where it would use the money that it took out of the European Development Fund and channeled it into, for instance, domestic activities or whatever. It is a strong development partner in the world. Okay,
let me just give a scenario that probably does the direct investments in these different countries. Let me draw you out of EU, not necessarily, and be an independent party. Do you see this growing bilateral relations or bilateral trade between UK and the different African countries?
Yes, for the simple reason, at least on the trade side, once it leaves the European Union, it will have to negotiate its own trade agreements with the countries of Africa. Quite a laborious process. We know that from our own.
Yeah.
I've worked in several trade negotiations with countries and blocs. They take years to do generally. So there might possibly be an impact between, for example, Rwanda and UK. Although I don't know what volume of exports go from Rwanda to the UK, but let's say it's of a certain percentage, 5% or so. That will, those products will enter UK under when they leave the European Union under different tariff arrangements. At the moment with the European Union, they're at zero duty.
Okay.
Duty-free entry of Rwandan products to the European Union. So Britain would have to offer the same deal. But I'm sure it would be mindful of not worsening the terms of trade. But it would have to negotiate that with Rwanda or with the East African Community, with SADC. The very blocs that we've just negotiated with over the last few years, it would have to open up its own negotiations on that.
Okay, now let me take you back to your chair, EU delegation ambassador.
I was still speaking as the EU.
Yes, now let me take you back to your chair. Now, what about the terms of trade between Britain and the EU? What is the situation, or what will the situation be immediately after the exit?
Well, after the exit, it will depend on what was negotiated during that period, that 2-year period, which might be done in a few weeks, or might be done in a few months, or might be done in those 2 years. It will be whatever they decide. But I've read that some of the up-and-coming political leaders feel that Britain will have access to the single market. And when we talk about the single market, we're talking of the single market of the 28 member states at present, 500 million population, 500 million consumers, the free movement of goods, the free movement of capital and people, etc. So, what will be the impact? Britain will have to bear in mind that if it wants to trade with the single market, it will have to do it on the terms of the single market. That is just the reality of life, as do most countries in the world, and certainly the Norwegians and Icelanders and so forth, who have, and Swiss, who are all actually associated with the European Union in one way or the other, and they're actually paying into the budget. Even though they're not members, they contribute. There is the European Economic Area, which is larger than the 28 member states, because it takes into account those countries on our margins as such, but which are important countries like Norway, for example. Britain will have to find what does it want as its new partnership with the EU. What is it willing? How far is it willing to go? I would assume that since it wanted to leave, it would not then accept, for example, the principle of free circulation of people, one of the issues that provoked a negative vote on the referendum.
Did the people actually understand what they were voting for, the people of England? Because England itself voted about 63%, the highest in the entire region, leaving Scotland with 38 and Northern Ireland with another percentage. Did the people of England really understand what they were voting for? I
think I'm tempted to use the analogy. It's like waking up with a massive hangover after a rather major event, and then you consider and you reflect on what you've just done. I think there's a certain amount of that going on in the United Kingdom. Yes, certainly in England, as you describe it, which was heavily in favour of more in favour of an exit. It's very hard for me to say, do people understand? I think many people understood exactly what it was.
And they understood the repercussions as well?
That, I wonder.
Okay.
I wonder. Because the market spoke so loud and clearly the next day, the next morning, within minutes of the announcement of the formal results of the referendum, that billions were wiped off the value of UK industry and UK banks, and the drop in the value of the pound. There's been a certain amount of recovery, but I think there'll be turmoil for a while yet. So the debate now in the United Kingdom, as we all read and hear and listen to, is exactly that. Where do we go from here? And there does seem to be a certain amount of uncertainty, chaos if you want. And I wouldn't call it chaos. I would just say that that views are evolving, and the message from the European Union at the European Council Summit recently was sorted out. Let's know what it is you want and when you want it.
Okay. Now,
no door is closed, by the way, on our...
No door is closed, meaning?
To Britain, to the United Kingdom. I mean, it's up to them to set the timetable. No one is... but you saw yesterday the highly symbolic meeting in Brussels of the 27 heads of government and heads of state.
Yes.
The empty chair of the United Kingdom.
Is still available?
But not in that meeting, because they wanted to consult amongst themselves about a member who wants to leave.
Very good. Now, we have another question still related about the 3 million people that recently petitioned for a referendum. Do you think this can be given credibility, and do you think in any way it could change the trend that is going on right now?
It's difficult to say. 3 million is quite a big petition.
It's about 10% of what actually voted, because over 30 million voted, around 30 million, yes.
Yes. And if you look at the structure of the vote, young people voted, I think 70–80% wanted to remain within the European Union. They feel particularly irritated at that their future in a European setting, as it is now, is compromised. But there you go, that's the nature of referenda. There might be a second referendum. I'm from Ireland, and we have a habit of having to have 2 referendums for each issue, because the first time it's negative and then we have to do it again until we get it right, if I can put it that way. There have been referenda in France, and in Netherlands, and in several countries. So who knows? I can't envisage a referendum right now until, as I mentioned earlier on, the political leaderships have been secured, and then they'll have to take that decision.
What lesson should we draw, especially like the East African community, SADC, and different other blocs that we have, especially in Africa? What can we draw from this particular situation that the EU is undergoing?
Well, I've spoken to several people over the last few days, and I know that there is concern, let's say, within the East African community, which I think has certain aspirations to follow our model, and why not? I mean, we've made lots of mistakes along the way. We can certainly share our learning process. That the departure of one member state is looked upon with a certain amount of nervousness in the membership of the East African community, and I guess in other countries it might be something similar. Lessons learned, I think that life can be tricky, and the world can sometimes be a complicated place, and I would ask our partners and dear friends to bear with us in this period. It must be from a distance like looking on at a sort of rather suicidal process, and many within feel the same way. What I would urge is not to take any satisfaction from this, and I have read a few comments. I don't think this is, I think it shows our fragility at times, and I think it exposes our hearts to and our minds to issues that trouble us, and issues which go to the core of our political life, which is how we combine together and how we share our destinies or not together. And it's not always easy. 28 member states with different aspirations at times. Could be on foreign policy, could be on fisheries policy, could be on anything. We need always to compromise. We need always to give up a certain amount of sovereignty for the greater good. And if it doesn't work, it can be repaired, and we hope to repair this, but not to gloat over us or to say, well, look, there go the Europeans. We understand that. We're not perfect. But my message to our partners, and particularly here in Rwanda and in this region, is Nothing has changed about the European Union's commitment to share in the development of the countries that we are working with. And only last week I signed a 200 million euro grant
to the agriculture, boost agriculture.
To the agricultural sector.
Yes.
This is, to me, this shows that we are there for the medium to long term. None of that will change. We're committed to agricultural in this country and to farming as we are to energy.
Grateful to that. Now, just a little bit away from Brexit as we wind up. Turkey entering the EU, it seems to be a pronounced issue also at the moment alongside the Brexit. Does this in any way affect the EU, or is it actually true?
Turkey is quite.
Or could it be a replacement of Britain when it goes out?
I doubt it, quite frankly, knowing what lay behind some of the no vote or the leave vote, as it were. But formally, we are committed to continuing our negotiations with the government of Turkey, difficult as they are. Turkey has undergone some huge tests of its security with the awful incident at Ataturk Airport in Istanbul yesterday, what's been happening along its border and with Syria. But it's still a candidate country, meaning it's a country formally negotiating its entry to the European Union. When that will happen, who knows? But it certainly is not going to happen soon.
Now, the last question, and I would love to have you, not to have you in the EU delegation ambassador seat, okay? I want to have you in a seat of Micheal Ryan individually.
All right.
Do
see
you
how far
think,
we get on that.
I don't know, do you think Britain will actually pull through? Do you see the exit actually happening?
If I was a gambling man, which I'm not, but I would put 70% of my money on it departing.
It's actually going to happen?
Yes, but 30%, because I'm a cautious person, on it remaining. Somehow that something will happen.
But 70% is a bigger percentage, making it...
At the moment, you have the referendum, you have the next political leadership in the United Kingdom will feel that they have to carry out the wishes of what quite frankly turned out to be 1 million people.
The majority.
Yes. But that's the logic of what we're discussing right now. But there is my little 30% will still be there to, as it were, to spread my bet and hope to possibly make some money on a stay rather than on a departure. But at the moment, it's too unclear, really, to pronounce with any definition. And as I said, I'm not a gambling man.
Thank you so much for not being a gambling man. And thanks a lot for making time to come on the BQ.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma.
I was talking to the head of the EU delegation to Rwanda, Ambassador Micheal Ryan. Thanks a lot for watching, and thanks a lot for some of you who sent in the questions. I'm Imi Molekatete, wishing you a wonderful time. Keep it at RBA. A lot is coming your way. Be well and be blessed.